Hi, everyone. Doc T here with another podcast. I'm so grateful that you're all here joining me. I've got some questions that I found on the Horse's Advocate, and each deserves its own response where everyone can just listen to it. It's better than reading it. This is from a gal or a guy. I don't know. They're called Another Chance Farms. I'm going to read their question to you. So I'm new to learning about Dr. Tucker's work and have been reading the blogs. In one of his articles discussing nutrition, he writes, quote, soft seeds include all grains, but don't forget sunflower seeds, flax seeds, and any other seeds in grain mixes. These too will have lectins that may be disrupting the gut lining. While there is no scientific evidence of this yet, why feed something to your horse he would never eat, at least continually, in the wild, end quote. Which got me wondering, soybean meal is not something the horse would ever find nor eat in the wild. So why is soybean meal a recommended feed for horses if the premise is to feed horses how they would be fed in the wild or close to it? I am truly curious and haven't been able to find an answer. Does anyone have any insight? This is really a thoughtful question, and several of the people on the Horse's Advocate group have answered it and done a really good job of it. So let me kind of piece together my thoughts on this. The first part of her question discusses something called lectins. Lectins are proteins that are found in the outer shell of plants, of seeds especially, that are there to poison the person or the animal consuming it. Because we've discovered that plants are about 1 billion years older than almost any other animal out there, including insects. And they had decided that they were going to make their living organism planted in the earth using roots to go into their microbiome that is in the root system and to stay stationary. They never dreamed that anyone would come around with chainsaws or giraffes would have long necks and reach their leaves up high. But they also determined that they wanted to live with us in a symbiotic relationship because that was better than an adversarial relationship. So they decided that with some things, they were going to make toxins so that when somebody ate them, it would discourage them from coming back and eating them again, whether it's kill them or just make them sick and weak and die. The battle was on, basically. So they created something called lectins. Now, we all know that all plants and animals are made up of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins and minerals, and mostly water. And air is obviously used in it, mostly oxygen as well as the nitrogen. So we're all living together, whether we're bacteria or fungi or fish or birds or mammals or plants. We're all basically using the same resources that this planet has given us to continue to live. But, you know, you think humans are bad. Every plant and animal out there is also trying to defend their right to live. And plants just can't get up and run. They can't hide. They can't camouflage themselves. And what's interesting is they actually fight between themselves. I'll give you an example. The black walnut tree. And we all, if you haven't heard, black walnut shavings can create laminitis in horses. That's a whole different subject. But when we were researching what was causing the laminitis from black walnut shavings, we found that black walnuts had a history of creating a chemical called juglone. And juglone would drop from the tree in the surrounding dirt around the base of the tree and would kill all of the plants that were trying to grow and allowing their saplings to take root and start growing. So when the adult tree died, the surviving saplings would grow and they'd have more. It's pretty interesting because trees just drop around them. And that's how they try to perpetuate their species. Juglone, by the way, was not the reason why horses became laminitic, but it's just interesting to note that there was a defense mechanism a proactive defense mechanism by a tree against all other plants trying to grow and invade the base of that tree. So that's basically the idea. I want to give you a couple other ideas what lectins are. There's something called the rhubarb plant. My mom used to grow rhubarb all the time, and she just, for whatever reason, loved rhubarb pie, probably because she put about 20 pounds of sugar in the pie and it tasted so sweet. I personally didn't like rhubarb, and I told her, yuck. And she says, no, no, this is how you make it. She showed me. She said, just remember, use the stem, never the leaf. And she didn't really tell me why, but it turns out that if you eat the rhubarb leaf, you will die. It's highly toxic to humans. So that was what helped the rhubarb plant survive. So when an animal came around and said, oh, I think I'll eat this leaf, it ate it and it would die. And somehow that message would be passed on to his brothers and sisters. And we stopped eating rhubarb leaves, but mom still just chopped off a leaf, took the stalk and cooked it and made rhubarb pie mixed with a lot of sugar. So the plant, it wasn't a very effective toxin to humans who could outwit it. You know, we had knives and we had cooking. Pinto, is it pinto bean? Which bean is it? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. There's a bean that if you don't cook it very well, you can actually get ricin out of it. And ricin's probably the most toxic thing out there. Terrorists have been known to use it to poison water sources in cities. So ricin poisoning is from the castor bean. That's it. So the castor bean has made its own lectin. So we don't want to mess with that. And if you pressure cook beans, pressure cooking, meaning raising the heat under pressure, will deactivate this lectin. And this is why beans that have been pressure cooked are not toxic to us. Here's another example of a lectin. It's called gluten. And almost everybody's heard about gluten. Gluten is one of those chemicals that is made by the wheat plant that when humans consume it can alter their genetic makeup and trigger celiac disease. And that's another epigenetic discovery where an environmental toxin will trigger a genetic change that produces a disease called celiac disease. So we don't want to eat gluten if we are those people who have triggered this in our genetic system. There's some of us, it'll never happen. So we eat no problem. Or there are some of us who the changes are very subtle. We feel bloated. We start, passing gas or burping. The next day we have brain fog. We won't actually go out and say, hey, we have celiac disease. But in reality, we are being affected by these lectins of the grains. And this is why all grains have created these different lectins. There's thousands of them. Wheat has another one called wheat germ agglutinin. And wheat germ agglutinin sounds like gluten, but it's not. It has the same chemical structure as insulin. And these wheat germ agglutinin in wheat will pass through our gut lining and go to our muscle cells and bind to the insulin receptors and permanently bind and make those receptors for insulin defunct. So it makes it harder and harder for insulin to bring to the cell the glucose it needs to restore its glycogen. So they become insulin resistant without even eating sugar because they're eating wheat, which also has sugar. So it's a double whammy. And this is why wheat is so bad and why I'm so against feeding horses wheat middlings, which is the outer shell of wheat, or wheat bran, or any product that has wheat bran in it as a laxative. So the bottom line is lectins are powerful plant proteins that are in the plant, usually in the outer hull of the seeds. And this is why I say all seeds are inflammatory to horses. I'm extrapolating, as I said in the quote, from human medicine. And if that's the case, why would we feed it to a horse? If a horse came across a field of wheat or oats or barley or sunflowers or whatever, it may have a feast for a little bit. It may also get very sick, but it's temporary because the seeds aren't there year round. So they can usually just pass on and okay, so I was sick, but I felt really good eating it. And well, I won't have that problem until next year. Maybe next year I won't eat as much of it. It's like going to a party that you overeat on and you feel sick. You still go to the party next year hoping for better results. So the question is, if all lectins and all seeds have lectins, then why eat soybean meal? Because soybeans are basically a seed or a fruit or a nut or whatever you want to call it of a legume plant called the soybean plant. And that's a really interesting, provocative question, because I've been promoting soybean meal for a long time, and it doesn't fly when you think about it in terms of lectins. By the way, one more thing about seeds. The hard seeds are meant for humans or animals to eat. And what I mean by hard seeds are apple seeds, peach, cherry, anything that has a nut on the inside we just don't want to crush with our teeth, and we usually spit it out or we swallow them and they pass through our digestive tract unscathed and deposit in the manure. What's interesting is what an animal will do is first, we have color vision because we can see the changes of the color. So the fruit is going to change color to attract our eye. Then it's going to change the glucose that it's using through photosynthesis. It goes through a change from glucose to fructose. And if I gave you a spoonful of glucose and you tasted it, you'd say, yuck. But if you had a spoonful of fructose, you'd say, yeah, now that's sweet. That's what I like. And that's why table sugar is 50% fructose and 50% glucose, and why high fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose. The sweeter it is, the more we want to eat it, more addictive it becomes. So fructose is only there when fruit becomes ripe, the color changes, the texture changes, and we like to eat the fruit. And then we take the seed on the inside and we either eat it where it's deposited and wherever we defecate, or we take the seed and we just drop it, or humans, we might throw it as far as they can, like an apple core or peach pit. We just throw it out the window as we're driving down the road, and it deposits the seed someplace else. And that's their purpose. They say, we want a human or a horse to eat our stuff and then move on so it can deposit the seed someplace else, hopefully in a pile of fertilizer that will help and promote our growth. And that's a very good system to use. But the soft seeds, such as the grain seeds, are supposed to just cling to our wet legs as we walk through there. Or as we walk, we shake it and the ripe seed gets loose and flies in the wind. So it deposits someplace further out. And that allows the seed plant to continue to grow further and further away from its source. So finally you get a whole field, if not a whole hillside, covered in grass or wheat or oats or something like that. And that's how soft seeds work. But they don't want us to eat them, because soft seeds, when eaten, get digested and they basically die. As Dr. Stephen Gundry said in his book, The Plant Paradox, which is all about lectins, he said that these are plant babies and they don't want their babies eaten. And that's what's happening. That's why lectins are there. So this is one of the main reasons why I'm against all grains for horses, because of the inflammatory response. And also because the added starch, i.e. glucose, that causes so many problems of insulin going awry and working too hard and creating fat deposits and increasing our body tissue, our body fat tissue. But back to this question, which goes again, I'll quote it, which got me wondering, soybean meal is not something the horse would ever find nor eat in the wild. So why is soybean meal a recommended feed for horses? If the premise is to feed horses how they would be fed in the wild or close to it. Well, a horse in a wild is a migratory animal. And I find it interesting because there's a Native American, and I apologize, I cannot remember her name, but she got a PhD in genetics, and she's established, I believe in Mobile, Alabama, a museum of the native wild horse. And she's been able to identify these native species that never left North America on a land bridge, and decided she would follow their paths. And she has found the migratory routes of these horses. And this is why I say to so many people, if horses didn't have fences, they would migrate down to Alabama for the winter and then migrate back up to the beautiful grass fields of Kentucky in the summer. They would be constantly moving. They're a migratory animal. And I say Alabama, and she set it up in Alabama because apparently that was a route focus for a lot of these migratory paths that she discovered. It'd be interesting to look that up, and maybe if I do my due diligence, I think I've saved it as a bookmark actually. It's just, I just can't find it right now. Maybe I'll add it to some notes, or maybe you can find it. But it's worth looking at. But anyway, so we put a fence up, and as soon as we put a fence up, we have to admit that there is nothing natural about how we work with horses. As soon as the fence goes up, or a stall wall goes up, or we keep them on our premises, they no longer have access to the wild migratory plants that they would come across. What I look at the plants on the migratory path is a smorgasbord. And I know I can't spell the word, it's not an American word, but we use it all the time, that depicts a table filled with a variety of foods that you normally wouldn't have at a meal, but you could pick and choose according to your fancy that day. I know that I've dove into some chicken wings on a smorgasbord, or some meatballs, or some cheese, or something that I fancy eating that day because my subconscious brain is telling me maybe I need some nutrients in that food. And that's what horses do. They tend to migrate along, and they find the food that they need, and they know that it's coming up around the next hill, and they will find it. I have one client who has recorded her horse chewing the lichen, which is that growth that you see on rocks. It's that very fuzzy, dark green to gray material that's growing on a rock. And he'll sit there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just licking it and kind of scraping his teeth on it, and she just lets him. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, the horse says, okay, I'm done, and walks away. And that's a horse getting a plant that he normally wouldn't find in his environment. And it's looked at as him attaining a need. Remember, there's something called the protein leverage hypothesis, which has been proven in humans, that says that we will continue to eat throughout the day until our amino acid needs are met. And then at that point, we'll trigger a satiation and we'll stop eating. And I find that these horses that are constantly eating either have this protein leverage hypothesis, they're looking for protein, they can't find it, or the horse will continue to eat for something unrelated, which means he's storing all of his glucose as body fat, he's insulin resistant, and he's starving at the cellular level. Or what's the other reason? Pica, they're chewing wood, they're chewing unusual things in the paddock or in the stall because they're looking for either a mineral or a protein, amino acid, or for whatever reason, they have a lack of something that they're searching for. I don't know if anybody's ever studied wild horses looking for cribbing or for wood chewing or for pica. Pica just means an abnormal diet, a food that an animal's eating. I don't know. I know I have a hankering, and I know every one of you out there has had a hankering. Hankering is an old American term that means an urge, a desire to find a food, and you will actually get in the car and drive someplace to find that potato chip because you're craving salt. And I've discovered just recently that there's an idea that we don't get enough sodium in our food, especially those of us who are getting away from junk food and get to the less salty food at home. We don't salt it enough, and that we're low in sodium, potassium, and magnesium. So I've decided to increase my sodium, potassium, and magnesium intake. And for about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, I was absolutely craving this. I couldn't get enough salt into me. And from that, I noticed a couple of things that have changed in my way of thinking. And if you all are feeding a salt lick and offering water from the well, I'm sure that your horse is getting all the minerals he needs. I don't care what everybody says. You don't have to be adding minerals. But in my neck of the woods, I don't salt my food. It's just something I've never done. And I drink water that goes through a filtering system that has most of the minerals taken out. And I'm realizing that I'm not drinking or eating a natural diet. So I've added some of this salt back in, and I can tell the difference in my voice tone, my acuity of thinking, and my sleep. As long as I have enough sleep, my sleep can be really good. So I know I'm going off on a tangent, but let me get back to this. A horse that doesn't have the restrictions of a fence will be able to meet its needs by migrating to different fields along its historical route through generations to find the amino acids and the other foods that he needs to grow and thrive. So the question is feeding soybean meal to a horse something that's natural? Well, it's not. But your horse has never been raised in a natural environment. It's always been raised in a stall behind a fence where it's limited in its ability to get forage. We feed it a pasture that's been seeded with 1 or 2 grasses. It may have some weeds, but the horse doesn't want to eat weeds either. I mean, it will only eat certain things, and that's one thing it won't eat. It's also fed a hay, which is either 1 or 2 grasses or a grass and a legume, and that's it. But we all know that all forages, their protein is about 50% absorbable. This is why a horse has to eat continuously throughout the day, is constantly foraging and chews on average 25,000 times a day. 25,000 is 1/3 of 86,400, which is the number of seconds in a day. So about 1/3 of the day, they're constantly chewing and eating something, and they're constantly looking for that. And we make the mistake of feeding them extra hay. So they're not only getting extra sugar from that hay throughout the night, but they're still not meeting their needs for proteins, for amino acids. So because the grasses don't have a broad variety, just keep in mind, if you don't know this, proteins are made up of 20 amino acids. Just like all the words in your dictionary are made out of 26 letters. 26 letters put together in certain combinations can make all the words in the dictionary. Well, 20 amino acids make all the proteins, of which there are 1 to 3 billion per cell in a body, and 35,000 different amino acids, 35,000 different proteins in every cell of our body. And every enzyme that's in there, every neurotransmitter, every connective tissue, all the integument, our hair and our fingernails, our hormones, they're all made up of proteins that are made from the same 20 amino acids. And 10 of those are actually made by the horse. The other 10 have to be consumed by the horse. They have to actually get their lips on it and ingest it. That's why they're called essential amino acids. And of these 10 essential amino acids, every one of them has an important job to do. And if one is missing, it's like getting a dictionary missing 1 letter. If you don't have W's, then there's no who, what, why, when, how, or tomorrow. And I can't say to you, where will we meet tomorrow? Because the only thing I could get out of my mouth is meet, because all the other ones aren't there. And you can't even say what, who, where, when, why. You can't even ask those questions because there's no W's in your dictionary. So those words can't exist. That's what an amino acid deficiency is all about. They're called limiting amino acid. And if you don't have all those amino acids, your body will crave to find the food to get that amino acid so it can continue to build the proteins that it needs. It's like you're building a house and you're all excited and there's no front door because they've decided not to make front doors anymore. So, you know, you've got this big hole in your wall that the rain and the wind, the bad guys come through because nobody's making doors anymore because the door maker decided he was going on vacation, and that's it. So if you're missing an ingredient, you can't have a complete protein. And soybean meal has all 10 of those amino acids. Soybean meal is not the grain or the nut or the fruit or whatever you want to call it of the legume plant soybeans, but it has been dehulled. So the outer part of the hull has been removed. So the lectins in the outer hull are removed. And also the oil has been extracted. And I'm going to have another whole podcast on oils, but you don't want to have seed oils. So that's been removed because that's inflammatory. And so what's left is what's called a meal that's been cooked. It's been exposed to specific temperature that will denature an enzyme that's in that will prevent the animal from using those amino acids, but it doesn't heat it so much that it destroys amino acids either. It basically denatures the protein, but leaves the ingredients there. It's like taking a cake and deconstructing it. So you have your pile of sugar, your pile of flour, pile of baking powder, and your pile of salt, and you have the basic ingredients, and they're still good, and you can recreate another cake with it, but you just don't have that cake. That's what the heating does for soybean meal. So soybean meal is a man-made idea that was developed to provide the amino acids that have been missing in animals. And it's used widely, extensively, worldwide in cattle production, both dairy and meat, swine production, and poultry. And if you look at every bag of commercial feed out there for your horse, you're going to find that soybean meal has been added to it. It either is in there or it's not in there, but it's the primary source of protein next to alfalfa meal that's being used because of the broad variety of amino acids that's in it. The only problem with the soybean meal that's in all these feeds is, one, it's not enough, and two, it's going into competition with inflammatory ingredients that will prevent the absorption of the amino acids. Now, the question is good. Why feed soybean meal when it's not found in the wild? And the answer is unequivocally because it provides amino acids that you're not able to give to your horse in any other way because it's not a migratory animal anymore. So they've been losing the protein because they're not eating it. They've been losing, I guess losing it is not right. They don't have enough amino acids because they're not getting anything in their diet to replace lost amino acids. And the loss of amino acids is coming from gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis, the creation of glucose, new glucose. Genesis means the creation of. And gluconeogenesis occurs in the liver of the horse, where it takes amino acids, among other things, and the amino acids are converted into glucose because the horse is starving, because the horse is becoming insulin resistant, and all the sugar you're putting in his mouth is being hoarded by the insulin, and the insulin's not allowing the glucose to become available for use. The insulin is taking it off to the liver where it's being converted into fat. And that's good grief. De novo lipogenesis. Lipogenesis is the creation, again, genesis, the creation of lipo, which is fat, and de novo means new. So the new creation of fat, that comes from all the sugar that is being placed in the mouth. It never reaches any place to be used. It's being brought to liver and created into body fat. Well, that basically is starving the horse, and it needs to make more glucose. And they can make glucose from pyruvate, they can make it from glycerol, and they can make it from amino acids. And I'm sure some of you have heard of metformin, and metformin will decrease the ability of the animal to create glucose from glycerol and from pyruvate, but it doesn't touch the creation of glucose from amino acids. This is why it's pretty much ineffective. And some people say that in humans, metformin has to be given 1,000 times the dose that they're giving it to actually get in there and be effective. And nobody's doing that because everyone's afraid to give 1,000 times the dose. And that's very human. And good grief, how much would it cost to give metformin to a horse? It'd be so much easier just to stop feeding glucose to the human or to the horse. And that way insulin would just go away. And that would allow gluconeogenesis to be decreased. So the protein would be maintained and not destroyed. You're probably going to hit the rewind button and replay all what I just said, but this is all tied together. So we give soybean meal to horses because it is got all the essential amino acids that they need to eat. its bioavailability is high. It's about 80%, which means 80% of all soybean meal is actually absorbed. So the amino acids actually get into the body and 20% is wasted. Just remember that all forages, it's about 50% absorbed. So you have to feed 2 pounds, you have to feed 20 pounds of hay at a 10% protein level to get 2 pounds of protein. And then half of that is absorbed and the other half is just excreted. So now you're down to 1 pound, which is 454 grams. I mean, if you're watching this on video, you're seeing me put my hand up, 4 fingers and 5 fingers and 4 fingers, 454 grams to a pound. So they're getting 454 grams of protein. And most horses, they say, are like humans, that you should be getting between 1/2 and 1 full gram of protein per day per horse. So if your horse weighs 1,200 pounds, and I know most horses weigh less, especially if you have a pony, a mini, an Arab, let's say, or if you have a draft, they weigh more. But I picked the number 1,200 for a particular reason. And a 1,200 pound horse should be getting between 600 and 1,200 grams of protein per day. And if he's plowing fields or doing strenuous exercise, where he's truly an athlete, you need to be close to the 1,200 pounds, which is very hard to get in, but certainly a lot more than 600 grams. And if you're feeding 20 pounds of hay a day or 20 pounds of hay and forage a day, they're only getting 454 grams and they are deficient. And this happens day after day after day. They're consuming their protein through exercise. They're consuming their protein through gluconeogenesis, and they're not being eating the foods that they need to rebuild. This is where soybean comes in. Soybean meal is an excellent source of high quality protein that's readily absorbable. And what's interesting is if you feed 1 pound of soybean meal at 48% protein, which is about between 45 and 48% protein, feed a pound of it at 80% absorption, comes out to 174 grams of protein. So just rounding figures, you got 450 and 170, and you're up to 620 grams of protein. So 1 pound of soybean meal will nail the protein requirements of horse at over 600 pounds for a 1,200 pound horse. And don't be afraid of going over. Everyone seems to be afraid of adding protein, but that's just not the case. There's been no proof of it. Excess protein, unless your horse has definitive liver disease or even kidney disease. Oh, good grief. Here comes my cat. Hold on. My cat is so cool. Whenever I'm doing a recording or I'm on the phone, he just finds the room and he just starts meowing, and it's accentuated to the microphone and you can't hear me. It's just kind of funny. So I just slam the door in the cat's face. He'll forgive me. Don't worry about it. Yes, I feed him. So yeah, he loves me. So getting back to feeding 1 pound of soybean meal, what's really nice is if it's 1 pound for a 1,200 pound horse, if you have a 600 pound horse, it's half a pound. If you have an 800 pound horse, it's 3/4 of a pound. If you have a 300 pound horse, it's 1/4 pound, because 1,200 is so divisible in so many ways. 100, 600, 800, 400, 300, 900, 1,200. They're all equal numbers. So you can take that 1 pound and divide it into the amount that you need to feed. And again, that's going to be the minimum. So you can always overestimate. So if it's a 1,000 pound horse and you feed a pound, you're fine, because you're going to be going above that 600 pounds. And so far, there's no evidence of feeding excess protein. Look at all the bodybuilders out there, human bodybuilders. They are striving to get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, lean body mass, in their diet every day. And they'll eat 6 to 8 eggs in the morning, and then steak at noon, a steak in the afternoon, a steak at night, or half a chicken, so constantly trying to get a variety of proteins. Now, I want you to think about one other thing. You and I are carnivores. Now, I know if you have chosen to become a vegetarian, that's a political or moral or ethical decision that you've made. But if you strip us down into the basic essence of our digestive tract, we are truly carnivores. The horse is nowhere near a carnivore. The only time I've seen a horse eat a fish is on YouTube, and it was a continuous loop. And I know that it was doctored. So I've yet to see a horse want to eat any meat. It is a true vegetarian. And that's why it has that huge colon sitting between its hind legs down into its belly, because it has to eat so much more vegetation to get the amino acids it needs in a day. And if you're truly a vegetarian, you have to eat a whole lot more than you're eating to get the proteins that you need up to 0.5 gram per pound of body weight. And this is why so many human vegetarians look frail, because they're just not meeting their protein needs, and they really have to work hard at it. It's possible, but it's just not the way we're built, or our bacteria in our guts are there. So, and the other thing is soybean meal has been fed forever. I've been using it since 1973. So I've got a 50-year track record almost of using it. And every feed company out there takes soybean meal and adds it to your senior feeds and to your other foods that you're feeding your horse. So as far as safety and efficacy goes, it's pretty well proven over the decades that it doesn't hurt horses. And in fact, it's beneficial, not just to them, but cattle, swine, and poultry. Soy in humans, everyone's got to worry about soy in humans, but we're not supposed to be eating beans. We're just not bean eaters. It's just not in our nature. And some of us eat beans and we get pretty sick on it. You know, beans, the magical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot. The more you toot, the better you feel. So eat your beans at every meal was something I was taught once I got married to Kathy. I don't know why. Came with her. But beans are very gaseous in us. Bean X is a pill that we can take so we can eat beans so they don't produce gas. But in a horse, they're very adapted to eating beans and soybeans, and especially when they're dehulled, de-oiled, and heat treated, they do just fine with it. So I'm not a big fan of technology as far as the biology goes, but I do understand that we are now living in a world that our ancestors didn't live in. And our ancestors over hundreds of thousands of years have developed ways that we thrive and that we usually die because another animal ate us or we fell off the cliff and, you know, lost our balance. But we didn't die from nutritional diseases as we are now. And we see these nutritional diseases, not just in humans, but in horses as well. So your question is a good one. Yes, feed soybean meal. Don't worry about it. It's been tested, time tested. Everyone eats it. Everyone's been living on it. It's not the cause of the demise of our horses, but it's actually the reason for it. And if you keep looking through the Horses Advocate there, or you join the Horses Advocate membership, where you can actually talk to some people with some better thoughts sometimes, more thoughtful answers. Although there's some really great thoughtful answers to this person's question on the Facebook group. But you're going to find that so many people who have added soybean meal to their horses' diets have now realized top lines being brought back, hooves now not crumbling or falling apart, lack of soft tissue injuries as they get the horse's weight under control and they add the structures they need to keep the connective tissues right, such as suspensories, tendons, etc. They become more muscular, which leads to another area for glucose to be disposed of, which is in the benefit of the horse and the human. And overall, they seem to be more calm once the inflammatory ingredients are gone, and the soybean meal adds their ability to think better. Cushing's disease, I think, is being brought under control for those people who are getting rid of grain and adding soybean meal. And some people have actually done blood tests and realized that they don't need the Percend or Pergolide anymore, because they're now adding the ingredients that is there to make the dopamine, which is what Percend or Pergolide does. So it replaces it, and they're seeing that their horses are no longer cushiony. They start shedding the hair coat in the spring. The hair coats look phenomenal. Their hay belly goes away. It's just interesting. So I haven't yet seen a downside of soybean meal. There have been a couple of horses that either don't want to eat it. Some horses that, as somebody said in this thing, if they're HYPP, it's high in potassium. But I'm not sure if I've actually seen that. I've heard some people with tying up syndrome in horses, which is genetic change, polysaccharide storage myopathy, PSSM. In horses, they have some trouble with soybean meal, but they have bigger fish to fry in their health. But devoiding the horse from protein is not helpful either. There are other sources of protein. I have to give a shout out to my client who grows hemp now. They think hemp meal is a really good protein source, and I can't argue with it. It's just more expensive. It's relatively new. It doesn't have a track record with horses. But if you want to try hemp protein, if you want to try pea protein, you can do that. Some people use whey, which is the manufactured protein from cow's milk that is on its way to becoming cheese, and they get this whey protein. Just make sure that you don't feed just whey because it'll have all the sugars in it. Whey protein has a lot less sugars, but it's not as good as whey protein isolate. And you can buy whey protein isolate at any health food store. Humans use it all the time as a protein source, but you better have a big pocketbook for that one, because I'm sure it works just fine in horses. But on a cost basis, you can get 50 pounds of soybean meal for about $18, depending on where you live. And 1 pound a day, that's 50 days for $18. I can't think of any other food additive you can give to a horse that is cheaper than that. And it's so effective, and it's time proven as being safe and effective for horses. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm so grateful you took the time to listen to this. I went down many rabbit holes, but the question is, why feed soybean meal if it's not if it's not a natural food for horses? And my answer is, we're not keeping horses in the way horses were intended to be kept. We are making their environment. We're breeding them ourselves. We're keeping behind fences. We're not allowing them to migrate freely like deer are allowed to run, or swine are allowed to run, and we hit them with our cars. You hit a horse with a car, it's not going to work. Cattle are kept behind fences for that reason. So there's my answer. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you visit the Horses Advocate Facebook page and post your questions there. I once a month get in there and try to answer as many as I can. But all my time is spent at the Horses Advocate website, thehorsesadvocate.com. And that's where I put all my ideas and thoughts together. That's where this podcast can be found. And if you become a member, then you'll have access to the further understanding of nutrition through the horse nutrition course. Or if you're interested in teeth, I've got the basics of horse dentistry in there as a course that you can take as part of membership. And you'll have access to the forums where we open up discussions, and you can actually ask me these questions and I'll answer them at thehorsesadvocate.com/membership. You can learn about the no grain challenge and why no grain challenge is being so effective for so many people. And hopefully in the near future, we're going to have a testimonial page. We have so many testimonials, it's almost hard to find them and count them and to read them all. But so many people around the world who are finding the removal of grain and the addition of soybean meal is being so beneficial to their horses. So that's it. Thanks, Doc T here. And I'm going to hit the record button and unrecord this thing. Talk to you later and see you next week. Bye. Hey, everyone. Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.